You recording?
Okay. All right. Good afternoon. My name is R.Ross, and I'm giving a presentation on alternative education, history of charter schools. First off, what is an alternative education? Alternative education is an educational program or system that is separate from mainstream educational program or system that is designed especially for students with academic and or behavioral difficulties and to adequately address the medical needs of any student. The preferred purpose obviously is to provide for children who cannot effectively learn in a traditional school environment to be able to have a safer, more practical environment for them to learn into. A traditional school environment would be what you would consider a public school. So this can be because of many things. First, we're going to have medical conditions including ADHD, Asperger's, autism, etc. Psychological and behavioral issues could be any type of mental health disorder such as OCD, bipolar, anything really. And learning disabilities would be such as dyslexia, and advanced skills would be maybe the kid's bored. Sometimes kids get bored. As a result, start acting out in school and don't start paying attention, slack off, end up with bad grades. So there's actual schools that are actually there for the gifted student. Curriculum that focuses on improving student self-esteem, fostering growth of individuality, and enhancing social skills. All of that is to help form the student into a normal member of the functioning of society by improving student self-esteem and self-worth, also making them be their own individual, but also be able to function normally in society. Which leads us to enhancing social skills, because a lot of these students are very socially inept. So what we do in the school is we start preparing them and teach them ways to cope and be able to do that. So another thing that happens in alternative education is they're more flexible in organization and administration. It allows for a variety of educational programs, and what this means is that they can organize and set up the schools to tailor to specific needs of other students. So meaning that these students, say you wanted to open a school for Asperger's, so you would have kids coming in that are strictly Asperger's, but you would set up your organization of your school to tailor to the needs of the Asperger's student. Your administration's goals would all be set towards taking care of Asperger's students. Originally, these programs were developed for students that are at risk of dropping out of our regular schools, but they expanded that to include any child that does not learn well in a traditional school environment. Meaning that it's there pretty much for any reason. If you do not like or do not succeed in a traditional environment and may benefit from one of these programs, you are allowed to enter into these programs. There's many different types of charter schools, and we'll get into that in a little while. It creates a safer, more therapeutic environment for the child with special needs, behavioral issues, etc. Meaning that it's a safe, calm, usually a smaller, structured environment that's there. It can be therapeutic. It can be made. They can do one-on-one. They can do pretty much anything they need to tailor everything towards the needs of the student to get them through to graduation. You can provide integrated education and clinical services in one place to facilitate learning. So a lot of these students have medical needs and they end up missing a lot of time in school. With alternative education in these standardized schools, the schools that they set up specifically for the needs of individuals, are all going to be in one place. And that one place is they can do everything they need, from therapy to reading to math, all in one location. The structures of the schools are a little bit different. The curriculum varies based on educational goals and student population, and what that means is the goals are tailored directly to the students, and the specific student population is is varies based upon what the school is there to use for. So in other words, if you have a student, let's go back to the Asperger's philosophy that we were talking about earlier. So if the school is structured for Asperger's syndrome, and so you can set it up so all the goals would relate to the Asperger's student, and the student population would be 100% students with Asperger's syndrome. These schools can be local or boarding schools, which means that you can either have to travel to the school, or they can be considered a local alternative to a public school, which happens a lot. Rochester's actually very common to have public schooling and supplement replacements with alternative education, i.e. charter schools, which we'll get into in a lot. So local alternatives, like the charter schools that I was mentioning, they do not require tuition. It's all 100% publicly funded, and they get their money in various different ways. So we have many different types of alternative education. Local alternatives to public schools. That's supposed to say public. Sorry, it says charter. It's an example of charter schools. They're free. They are 100% different than public schools, and they're very structured similarly, but there's a lot more freedom in these charter schools. We have some special needs day schools. These are schools where special needs students would go, and they would learn to function properly as adults in our modern society, as well as build their social skills, and then they will also experience day-to-day regular school activities. And then lastly, well, not lastly, we have the independent private schools, which are the schools that your parents generally would spend a lot of money sending you to. So with that, we have therapeutic programs that are made just for students that need a lot of therapy. It's relaxing, it's calming, it's very set up very differently. And then you have emotional growth boarding schools. Those are just different types, and there's many different types. There's actually endless combinabilities of types of charter schools that we could set up. So next, we're going to take a look into a video here. This video basically gives you an example of an alternative school. It's actually quite a neat school, and we'll talk a little bit about it after the slide is complete. So give me one sec here.
Let us introduce you to Raju. Raju wakes up in the morning and goes to a mainstream school. Jack. Jack wakes up in the morning and goes to a special needs school. Sammy. Sammy is not severe enough to be in a special needs school, but he hasn't been accepted in the mainstream one due to his behavioral issues, lack of communication, or education to life, and has nowhere to go and is stuck in the middle. This is why we are introducing you to MAE, Modern Alternative Education.
Again, this is just an example of an alternative school.
At MAE, each student will have his or her own individual education plan, vocational plan, and social schedule.
One of the best benefits to modern alternative
A place
education.
that will educate children in a suitable environment to their needs with the highest standards and specialized curriculum. MAE will accommodate children from ages 8 to 18 years old. Why 8? Because our priority is for children to go to mainstream school. If they do not get accepted or cannot handle it, we welcome them at ours. We will also be running after-school support classes, so students and others. Our aim is not to isolate these children, but to help them develop their strengths in a loving, protected environment before having to go out and become independent in the outside world. We would love for Sammy to graduate from MAE and go to enjoy an independent, successful life as an adult. MAE is a non-profit dedicated to expanding its services to as many students as possible. Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much.
So I thought that this gave a great example about what we're looking for in modern education. So with that, that kind of gives you an idea of what the idea behind alternative schooling is. Basically, they tailor to the students, as you saw. They're kind of there for the students to just fall through the cracks. It's great that the opportunity is there for the students, but it's not always knowing that this is an option to students. And part of the reason why I'm doing this presentation on this type of schooling is because I wanted students to be aware that this is an opportunity. So this video here that we're going to go into next is basically a testimonial from a student that goes to an alternative school. Gives you kind of an idea of what the day in life of a student is.
It should be someplace that you want to go.
Kind of gives you some testimonials from students that are in alternative schools. This particular one is a middle school. I'm probably not going to watch the whole video. We're just going to go cruise through a little bit of it. But I want you to hear from actual middle school students that are involved with this type of education and how it actually benefits them. So we'll hear from a little bit of a testimonial from that kid that you just saw pop up on the screen a minute ago, and he'll give you some ideas on what he goes through on a daily basis. And then we're going to follow it up. We're going to go into charter schools right after this, but I just wanted you to get a feel for what it's like to be in an alternative education setting. So without further ado, here's that video.
When I walk into all school each day, I feel very positive. I feel I'm going to see my friends, whether it be my teacher friends or my friends.
Entered into the realm of technology, which is kind of relevant.
They help you with whatever it is you want to work on.
We start off with immersing ourselves into the content to learn more and ask questions.
Every quarter of the school year, we choose a topic.
Currently, we are working on something called Blueprint.
We're able to design anything that we want, but we have to state why we would like it that way, how it would benefit for us.
I teach at the design school at Stanford, and you're actually getting essentially the same experience today that we teach to the Stanford grad students. We're really about supporting creative confidence, and that is basically teaching our students how to be comfortable in tackling new environments and doing new things and creating. You guys are going to be working in pairs on a real problem that affects you on a day-to-day basis, and then find an opportunity to design something for someone else in the classroom.
What would make the chairs better?
They had little cushions on them.
Okay. With the design process, you have to...
So the beauty of this is giving the students the chance to have their own way of thinking when it comes to this particular, and promotes individualized thinking. It allows them to be at the center of their own education, and it allows them to continuously check themselves and keep themselves on task, and they really actively engage in the material.
Learn how to make it appealing from other people's point of view. You get to learn about that through empathy and your connection with other people.
We go on a field trip nearly every Tuesday, whether it be sort of an in-class field trip where you're learning on a new project, you bring in an expert, you really get inside of the topic.
It's finding what excites you and then exploring that and going deeper and deeper, and then pretty soon you'll realize, wow, there's nobody in front of me in this particular field, and that's really exciting when you get there, because that's when lots of discoveries happen.
It's a whole new view of the class. I mean, it's a completely different perspective.
The best way to predict your own future is to create it, okay? To have a focus, to have a...
This is not a teacher. This is a person from the community. They bring them in, get real life experience. They learn, and everything they teach and they learn, it gets directed towards real life experiences, and they learn kind of in a real world setting.
Goal and go for it. That's how you create the future that you want.
You don't just sit down with dusty textbooks, researching things, memorizing things. You actually get to experience them for yourself.
This is pretty comfortable.
I feel like we learn better that way.
They're building the chairs.
I feel like I have very strong relationships with the teachers here.
I have enrolled us in a new math contest.
I feel that the stronger the relationship between the teacher and the student, the better the learning process is. A couple weeks ago, I had to take the Lowell test to get into Lowell High School. Common Core says that pre-algebra is what public schools are learning right now, and that's definitely not going to cut it for the Lowell test. So instead of me learning pre-algebra, my math teacher had me take a geometry test.
Root of A squared, what's that?
And by him realizing, oh, this is not going to cut it, I'm going to give you something better that will help you get to a place that you want to be and flourish.
How do I share that with you? We're able to study what we're interested in within good reason.
The writer, in terms of
my writing and reading teacher, helps me specifically on persuasive writing and learning how to write an essay and learning how to write a book.
I love the comics. I love that you're writing about something you love. Let's make sure you also practice writing about the things that I assign.
I know, I'm doing both.
Now you're doing both? That's amazing. Part of our learning here is to learn as a group, and part of our learning here is to learn as individuals. We have something called a playlist, which is kind of like our own personal work cloud. On the playlist, we...
So, with that being said, we're not going to finish the video, but kind of gives you an idea what the curriculum's like in an alternative school. So you got an example of an alternative education school, and now you're kind of seeing what the curriculum's like in the alternative education schools. It will provide you guys with a copy of the PowerPoint and the links to the videos if you want to watch them in their entirety. So, moving on from there, we're going to go into charter schools, and you're going to kind of get a little brief overview from this video of what a charter school is, and then we'll go into detail on it.
Historically, education in the United States has been split between private schools and traditional public schools. However, this dynamic changed in 1991 when Minnesota passed the first law establishing charter schools in the state. Since then, a majority of states have some kind of charter school system. But what exactly is a charter school? Charter schools offer education ranging in grades K through 12 without charge to students. Charter schools are funded with tax dollars, but are generally subject to fewer rules and regulations than traditional public schools, and they usually receive less public funds per pupil than public schools. Charter school students typically take the same state-required standardized tests as public school students. Depending on state law, these schools can be started by parents, teachers, nonprofit groups, corporations, or even government organizations. Charter schools may focus on specific skills and subjects like math or science, or may be aimed at students who require alternative learning methods, such as teaching lessons that use visual or more hands-on approaches. But these entities just can't start one whenever they please. They must first obtain authorization from either the school district, city, or state, depending on how the charter school laws are structured. And the charter school model has achieved various levels of success. Over the past 25 years, the number of charter schools in the U.S. has skyrocketed, forcing more competition and faster improvement among existing public and private schools. As of 2016, there are almost 7,000 charter schools serving 3 million students. And since 2000, charter school enrollment has increased by 600%. But as charter schools have become more popular, opposition has grown. Teachers' unions and other public school activists argue that charter schools take money away from traditional public schools. However, it's unfair to hold minority parents and students hostage in underperforming public schools. Overall, charter schools have provided an entrepreneurial challenge to the status quo and delivered results that make it worth expanding this option for parents. According to a 2015 Stanford study, not only do charter schools provide significantly higher levels of growth in math and reading for all students, but minority and low-income students benefit disproportionately more. Charter schools are becoming a bigger part of the U.S. education system every year, and for millions of American families, they offer a much-needed choice that's different than a one-size-fits-all public school. Every other sector of the American economy has benefited from the ability to compete and improve. Why not education?
To subscribe to our YouTube channel, click here. For more from Information Station.
Okay, so that was kind of a quick little entrance into charter schools. So, leads us to this. What is a charter school? Independently run public school granted greater flexibility in its operations in return for greater accountability and performance. So once again, it's 100% based upon performance. So once again, it's basically a charter. What it is a contract with the state of New York or whatever state they're operating in, and it basically outlines the school's mission, which is what their idea behind their teachings is. The program is designed to tailor to the school's mission. The students served must fit the guidelines for the program. So again, it goes back if you wanted to create a school like for Asperger's, for instance. And then performance goals are how they kind of set the standards for the students. And then the methods of assessments are their testing, like standardized testing. Most charter schools will use whatever your state's standardized testing is. But again, they must meet all of these in order to keep their charter and remain in business. So the difference from public schools, and it's kind of outlined in that video, we're just going to go into a little deeper here. Public schools of choice, meaning that the families choose this for them. That's what makes it alternative education, because it was an option. It's definitely, as the video stated, very beneficial to minorities and students that just really don't care. We see that a lot in public schools, and the charters are there to kind of get them more involved and do that. But again, once again, they operate with the freedom from some of the regulations that public schools face. So basically, their freedom is in their curriculum. They can create. It sometimes creates a little bit more work for teachers, but the teachers can also tailor the lessons more to the needs of the student. The students benefit very much from this. However, it does create a lot of work. The teacher that I'm shadowing at the presentation that at the school that I'm working under, he told me it's a charter school, and he told me that he sometimes works 7 days a week. He can put on his weekends. He sometimes was putting 14 to 20 hours in just to set up his lessons, because they hand design them. It's not just handed down from the state. They're more, they have to tailor their lessons to meet, again, going back to, they got to tailor all their needs to meet all of this. So it's a lot different than the curriculum that you're going to see in a public school. They're more accountable for academic results, more than anything. In public schools, it's not a huge deal, but in charter schools, if they don't have the results they're looking for, they can get into a big trouble. This leads me to our next point, is they must have academic achievement. Academic achievements technically is the same thing as being accountable for academic results. They must hit a certain standard of achievement for academics. They must be financially responsible as an institution. and they must have organizational stability as an institution. If they don't do that plus meet, once again, all this, they will they can close the school, and sometimes they can close right dead in the middle of a term, and the students will be dispersed out to different locations. Freedom. Great. The freedom continues into design of the schools. They can vary deeply in design. It depends on what they're talking about and what they're working on and what they've tailored their needs to. But it's pretty cool because anyone can start a charter school. It could be your mom, your dad, your uncle, your aunt, your second cousin twice removed. It doesn't matter. You can, as long as you can you can receive the funding, you can meet the standards, you have a facility that's up to code, and the state approves it, which it goes through the Regents Board and a couple other things in New York State to get an approval. That's the only way you're going to have you can start the charter school. But you could go out and start a charter school tomorrow. It's all up to you. They receive funding based on per pupil basis, and this works pretty similar to public schools. Generally, they get the funding comes in the form of every student they have. For instance, if they end up filling 198 seats out of 200, they're going to receive a certain X amount of dollars per student that they're funding for. So it's very important in charter schools that they fill them. But a lot of times they don't have a problem, because in Rochester especially, there's a lottery system that they put in place after they reach their quota for students, and that's how they fill their per pupil basis. So what I'm going to leave you with, and we'll talk about it briefly before I end our lesson, we're going to look at a video on pros and cons of the charter schools, and once that works for us, if I can get it to pull open, hang with me. Loading. There it is.
Charter schools are schools that receive public funding but operate separately from the established public school system. Many people, including our new controversial Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, believe charter schools offer an option to improve our education system. Others strongly disagree. Let's take a brief look at the pros and cons of charter schools. Charter schools allow for different approaches and styles of education. Most traditional public schools all use roughly the same method of teaching students. Charter schools, on the other hand, may choose to focus more on certain subjects like math and science. They may use Montessori methods or other alternative methods to education. All of this allows charter schools to be better for certain types of students who may not do as well under the traditional education system. Charters tend to be smaller schools with smaller class sizes and have closer-knit communities. Smaller class sizes have numerous benefits for students. They allow teachers to know their students on an individual level and have a better understanding of their academic abilities and struggles, which allows them to tailor their education more closely to what the student actually needs. Charter schools encourage competition and innovation. Charter schools give families more options as to where to send their kids to be educated, which makes charter schools and regular schools have to compete for enrollment. This encourages better results and innovation. Charter schools also have less restrictions placed on them, and this allows them to experiment with new styles of education. Charter schools often do not provide their own transportation. Public schools will bus all students in their area of service to and from school, but many charters will require parents to drop off students or have them use public transportation. This can make it much harder for students with working parents to access many of these schools, as they may not have the time and resources to facilitate their own transportation. Smaller charter schools often have fewer options for sports and other extracurricular activities. Extracurriculars and sports are often a hugely important part of a child's educational experience, and the more limited options that a charter school provides can be a big downside. It is important to note, however, that because you self-select into charter schools, you'll be able to see ahead of time what extracurriculars they offer, and you can base your selection around the extracurriculars most important to your child. Charter schools are not as stable as traditional schools. Charter schools operate on a contract, and they can and have shut down both between school years and even in the middle of the school year. which can have serious negative repercussions on the educational and social development of the students. Ultimately, how good or bad charter schools are depends quite a lot on the specific school and the state's regulation of them. Are they allowed to bring in for-profit management companies, and do they? What accommodations do they provide for students with special needs? How are they held accountable by the state? All of these and many other issues vary from state to state and school to school, and have an enormous impact on how good or bad the schools end up being, and what their impact is on other public schools in the area. Let us know what you think, and like and subscribe to learn more.
Okay, so pros obviously is a different approach. You can use Montessori's and certain different perspectives to work with the students. It's very beneficial. Much smaller classes, so they're very close-knit. Allows for better relationship building. Students and teacher relations is much stronger, and allows for better learning. They can use innovative forms of learning. More options for the teachers. They can work with things they aren't bound to the full state curriculum. And then obviously we have the cons, but a lot of those cons that he mentioned in the video here are very well ironed out in Rochester. As far as transportation goes, the students at my particular charter school that I work in, they are bused in from all over Rochester. They do make it to the charter school by bus. The parents don't have to run into that issue. Same with sports and extracurriculars. The school does offer some on their own, but they do allow the students to go to local districts and branch into the playing on teams in that area. So the students don't lose out. They just have to get to a different location. Yes, instability is a big part, but if you're using an alternative school, a charter school as an alternative to public school, and they're run by the Rochester School District, you're not going to run too much into that problem because they are stable. They've been in service for a while. They are meeting their charters. They aren't going anywhere. It's rare that a charter school actually does get shut down for any particular reason. But with that, just to review, we went over alternative education. We learned a little bit about it, saw some testimonials from alternative education. Then we went into charter schools and how they were formed and what we expect out of them, compared them to public schools, and did the pros and cons of them. So now it's up to you. You need to decide whether or not you want to put your kid into a public school or a private school. Public school or a charter school. I mean, it's really based on opinion, and you will make that decision on what best suits the needs of the child. With that, I'm going to leave you there. So again, my name's Randy, and this was Alternative Education. Have a good day.